Today's episode of my Tudor Christmas Advent series is a little darker because we're stepping into the world of real medieval and Tudor Christmas superstitions, not the Victorian inventions or modern folklore we sometimes hear, but beliefs recorded in late medieval English sermons, Tudor writing and 16th century sources. Hi, I'm historian and author Claire Ridgway, and I'm going to share 3 of the strongest, most authentic Christmas superstitions, and they're wonderfully atmospheric. Christmas wasn't only a season of light. For the Tudors, it was also a moment when the boundary between the natural and supernatural felt unusually thin. Let's look into this. One of the oldest and best attested midwinter beliefs in medieval and Tudor England was that animals could speak at midnight on Christmas Eve. Now, this wasn't a whimsical children's tale. It appears in several late medieval sermon cycles where priests warned parishioners not to seek out the stable at midnight in hopes of hearing the miracle. One English sermon cautions believers against going into the barn at midnight to hear the ox and ass speak. The belief drew on the nativity story. Medieval tradition held that the ox and ass witnessed Christ's birth, but it also fits into a much older European midwinter idea that nature itself paused and spoke during the Holy Night. By the Tudor period, the clergy still complained that people slipped out to barns or byres at midnight. Whether anyone ever claimed to hear the animals is another matter. But the superstition was very real and widely enough known that later folklorists like Jacob Grimm quote earlier English sermons to show just how deeply rooted it was. If the first superstition is magical, the next one is downright eerie. Throughout the medieval period and still alive in the 16th century, many English people believed that if you stood in the church porch at midnight on Christmas Eve, you would witness a procession of the dead, specifically the spirits of those who would die in the coming year entering or passing into the church. The belief turns up in medieval church injunctions, which warn parishioners not to attempt this kind of divination. It fits a wider late medieval English pattern of death watch superstitions on great feast days. By the Tudor era, the practice was still widely known enough that Reginald Scott, in The Discovery of Witchcraft, 1584, mentions Christmas as a time when people try forbidden magical practices, especially attempts to foretell death. Scott doesn't approve, of course, but his complaint proves that the custom existed. This ghostly vigil made Christmas Eve a moment of intense expectation. Imagine standing in the icy porch of a 16th century church, listening to the bells ringing the nativity, convinced that any moment the spirits of neighbours and strangers might pass before you. It's one of the most authentic Tudor ghost stories we have. For a truly Tudor supernatural figure, we have one famous source, Shakespeare. In The Merry Wives of Windsor, circa 1597, he describes a spectral antlered figure. Quote, "Sometime a keeper here in Windsor Forest, there is an old tale goes that Herne the hunter doth all the winter time at still midnight walk round about an oak." This is extraordinary because it proves that in the late Tudor period, English audiences already knew the legend of Herne the hunter, a ghostly stag-horned figure who haunts the winter forest. Shakespeare ties Herne specifically to midnight, winter and spectral wandering, precisely the time when the wild hunt was said to ride in Northern European tradition, often between Christmas and Twelfth Night. Herne is a rare example where we can say with absolute confidence, yes, this supernatural Christmas season tale was known in Tudor England, because Shakespeare expected his audience to recognise it. All 3 beliefs survive because for medieval and Tudor people, Christmas Eve was a threshold night. Christ's birth, the darkest moment of the year, midwinter folklore, ancient agricultural rhythms and church liturgy all collided. It was a moment when heaven felt closer. The natural world seemed to pause, and the supernatural, both wondrous and frightening, brushed up against everyday life. Thank you for joining me for these 3 wonderfully atmospheric Tudor Christmas superstitions, all drawn from medieval and 16th century sources. If you enjoyed this more mysterious side of Tudor festive life, please do give the video a like, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the rest of my Advent series. And tell me in the comments, which of these 3 would you have been brave enough to test at midnight? I'll see you tomorrow for more Tudor Christmas history. Oh, and by the way, if you can't get enough of Tudor history, you might want to look into becoming one of my channel members and getting a whole host of Tudor goodies.